going to be, right? Because this isn't a game yet. I was thinking, well, since it's going to subtract out the actual aiming skill part out of playing pool, then it's going to turn it into more of a strategy game, right? It's going to be about just choosing where your balls are going to end up, whether they get in the way of pockets or whether they interfere with the opponent's shots. So it's going to be kind of like a turn-based strategy game, but it's pool. That's going to be really cool and like physics-based. That didn't work out, and the reason is that the game is completely unplayable if you're trying to make a plan. And to illustrate that, so here, I'm trying to shoot this ball straight up, and as the player, I want to try and create, say I'm trying to hit the red balls into specific places, I'm trying to create a scenario where the red balls are going to go where I want. And you'll see, as I barely rotate this, wah! Like the butterfly effect kicks in because this physics is so crazy and unpredictable that the balls just go everywhere. And as a player, I cannot make a plan. So like this game, as I envisioned it on paper, is totally unplayable. I tried some things, like right now I'm actually pressing little keys that rotate microscopically. Like you can barely see the table turning, right? And yet the balls are still freaking out. Like that's how crazy physics is. And I tried to think, like, is there some way to help the player visualize this and make plans? And I'm like, no. There was no way to actually make this into a real game. So I was very happy that I didn't start out by like rendering a 3D pool table and like doing cool sound effects and like licensing Havoc and stuff, right? Because that would have been a big mistake, because I would have been screwed. So that's what prototyping is all about. But I love that feeling, that creepy feeling of really being able to see the future and of the future being inevitable, right? And I wanted to make a game about that. And that fed into some other ideas that I had about time, where I started making this game called Braid. So some of the other time-oriented ideas I had were things like, I've always been interested in quantum mechanics, and there's this interesting aspect of that where if you go down to like the fundamental laws of the universe, there's no arrow of time. Like time going forward is the same as time going backward. But that's totally not how we experience the macroscopic universe, like walking around. So which part is the illusion, right? Is it our world or is it the micro world? And what would it be like, if we could create a microdomain where time actually did behave the same forward and backward? What would that be like to play, right? Another one, I had an email conversation with some friends about Prince of Persia: Sands of Time was a game that had come out several years ago, and we all thought that the rewinding in there was kind of gimmicky and not necessarily the right thing. And one question was, well, what if you made a game and you could rewind whenever you wanted and the player would never die? Like, what would that do? Well, it would destroy consequence. Like, if your player can't get killed, all of game design goes out the window and it's terrible and the world ends. But I wanted to try that out and see how it felt. Just see how it felt to live in a world without that kind of traditional consequence. And I decided to do it in as simple of a domain as possible to avoid all those physics problems of butterfly effect and things going crazy. So I figured a Super Mario World style platformer would be a great way to do it. Because the physics are very simplified. There's a simple kind of jump, and you bounce off things, but you generally only bounce off one or two things, and there aren't chain reactions or anything like that. So I built this prototype for this game, Braid, and it was the most creative and productive time of my entire game development career. I was on vacation in Thailand, and I did this thing for a week. I was conscious that I was going to send this game to some friends and have them, tell me what they thought of it. So I made sure the controls were very prominent. It sort of has this sort of fiction because I like. It's got some typos I just noticed. But this sort of sets up the story. And as you can tell, there are basically no production values here, right? I'm controlling my little guy, and he doesn't even animate, and I can jump, and the jump is timed really badly. But he can run around, and he can go through these levels, and etc. And I'm going to show you a lot of the time stuff that happens in this in the almost finished version of the game. But I just want you to get the feel for this one, right? So I did this in a week. And like I said, I started out with all those ideas about time. But I implemented the rewind one first because I saw a lot of potential right away. I was thinking about it there's all these rules of platformer design that if you've read design literature, you know about. One example is you shouldn't have leaps of faith, which is where you require the player to jump into somewhere that he can't see in order to progress in the level. Because there could be spikes or lava down there and you could die. And if you require the player to jump somewhere and he's wrong about it and he dies, he'll never trust you again. He'll be like, oh, the level designer for this game doesn't know what he's doing and I never know what I'm doing, and this safety net sort of goes away, right? But if there's no consequence, of dying, then leaps of faith just don't matter anymore, right? So I suddenly saw a whole bunch of opportunities like that to say things about platform games, and I just ran with it. And I started getting more and more ideas about how to build things into this rewind mechanic, and I eventually threw out all those other ideas that I started the game with, like the arrow of time thing and the seeing the future thing. But this prototype went great. Ideas kept coming and coming, and I'll show you the final result in a bit. But here's an interesting point, which is that if I'd stuck with one of my earlier game ideas and tried to make it work, like that Oracle Billiards, or some of the other prototypes I didn't show because there's no time, there were lots of them, any of those I could have taken them and tried to improve the game design and make it better. But if I'd been working on that, I wouldn't have been working on this, which was the best game that I've ever touched, like, in my life. So that seems to conflict with the advice that I was giving you guys earlier about how you have to be dogged and like never quit and always finish things. And the truth is actually a little more nuanced than that, right? It's you should always finish things as long as it's the best thing for you to be working on right now. And how you know that is, I don't know. It's a black art again. I feel like as long as you learn something from a prototype and you have another idea that's maybe at least as good, then maybe it's time to move on. So I'm going to show for a bit where this game ended up. Some of you may have played this because it was in the Best of the IGF exhibit here last year. However, it was a much earlier version of the game that didn't look as good. And it also takes longer to load because it actually has graphics now. Yeah. I'm just going to use some cheat keys to flip through places. But it's unlocking all these worlds that I can go to. The concept of this game ended up that whereas platformers traditionally take you through like the fire world and the ice world and like all these different scenarios, in here you would go to different worlds and time would behave differently in each one. So, I'll go into the first world here, and I'm sort of using, this is not normally where you would enter the world, but I'm using a cheat door. And this level has the purpose of introducing you to the game. So the goal of the game is to collect these puzzle pieces like this thing that are glowing, and it's too high for me to jump to, right? But it's trying to teach you non-verbally that, hey, you can jump off these monsters and bounce higher, and that's how you can get some things, right? I'm actually going to earlier in the level. This is the first puzzle piece, and you can try to get it by jumping, and you probably, since you're new to this game, end up dying. And you learn very early here that if you die, the game will just pause, and then let you press shift and undo what you did and try again. So this game is very forgiving that way, right? You can never lose, you can never die. And the extent of your rewind is also, your rewind ability is also much, I don't know what the right word is. It extends much further into history than in most other games, right? So I can actually rewind, and I can speed it up a little bit, and go back, all the way back to where I entered the level. And actually, you can probably do that. If I've been playing that level for about an hour, I could probably do that. And then, oh, I didn't want to rewind that far. It's a mistake, so I'll go back forward and redo all the stuff, right? So that was the first thing that I did in this prototype, and I established that as the feeling of the game, right? And everything had to, like, match that. Yeah, I won't go into that any further. It's just hard to explain. But some things you do, and they don't fit the game, and some things you do, and they do fit the game. So as soon as I implemented that, I came up with a bunch of puzzles that were sort of riffs on the classical platformer, like you can't do this, or this is too hard to expect players to do. Now things are easy, because if you miss a jump, you just try it again, right? The next thing I put into the prototype was, hey, what if there's some objects that are immune to your power to rewind time, right? So in this version, those are denoted by these purple sparkly things. And to illustrate how that might work, I'm going to jump down in this pit and get this key that I need to open that gate up there. But now I'm stuck. Like, this pit is too deep to get out. There's nothing to bounce off. There's no way up. So I can rewind my way out, though. And the key comes with me. And because it's immune to that whole, like, regular flow of time thing. And I just came through this gate, and I can rewind my way back through the gate, and it doesn't close, right? It's sparkling. And this level is supposed to teach you about that kind of behavior, but there's a lot of puzzles that get built out of that. So, for example, here, there are these clouds that you can stand on, and I want to get across there, but there's too much